What's up everybody, Matt Maran here for another car review. This is of course the 2017 Nissan Rogue Sport. Huge thanks to Nissan for providing me with this very nice Rogue Sport to review for you guys today. So about the Rogue Sport, well, it's came over from Europe and elsewhere in the world where it was known as the Qashqai, and now we're getting it here in the States as the Rogue Sport, and looks very similar to the standard Rogue. So I can see why they named it the Rogue Sport. Sport in this case stands for a smaller version. It's not any faster or any more performance oriented, unfortunately. Very similar headlights to the standard Rogue and very similar features. Going out to the back, that's really where you notice the largest change, where it's much shorter there in the back and a little more scrunched in and looks pretty good. My only complaint with the back end is there's a lot of black plastic on that rear bumper, and it looks a little low rent in my opinion, even for this mid-grade SV trim. And so I would like to see that whole bumper actually painted. I think that would make it look a little bit nicer, but I get that they're going for the rugged look here with the Rogue Sport, and with crossovers having the black plastic is all the rage these days. And so overall, it's still a pretty good looking little crossover that doesn't look too shrunken down. It still has good proportions, and it doesn't seem like it's a micro car or anything. It looks still like it's an actual SUV and looks pretty good. As for the interior of the Rogue Sport, well, it's a pretty nice place to be. Anyway, first things first, sitting down in these seats, you have these nice cloth seats here in the SV trim that are about your average crossover style seats. Very soft and comfortable. Bolstering on the thighs is fairly mild. On the torso though, it's pretty wide, but still has some bolstering there to it to hold you into corners a little bit better. And overall, they're not bad seats. Not amazing or anything, but for a crossover, they're pretty good. Next is the steering wheel in the Rogue Sport, which is actually really quite nice. Just a really nice leather wrapped wheel here. It's got a flat bottom. It looks pretty good too with this plastic trim that looks like metal and does a pretty decent impression. And then you have a nice 9-3 grip. It's just a nice thin wheel for the most part, and so it feels really good. You have little 10 and 2 notches here, and just a really great feeling wheel. You do have a good assortment of buttons here on it. It's a tiny bit cluttered, but not too bad, and overall, still pretty easy to use, and a great wheel overall. Next are the gauges in the Rogue Sport, which are basically the same as the standard Rogue, and that's okay because they're really great, just basic 2 analog gauges there. You have for tachometer and speedometer, and then the auxiliary gauges beneath those. You have a nice digital portion there in the middle that is color and has, some basic information, nothing crazy there, but all the basics you would want in a center screen like that. It even has a torque split there for the all-wheel drive system, since this one does have the optional all-wheel drive system, so that's kind of cool to keep tabs on if you're in slippery circumstances or whatnot. And so overall, a pretty good set of gauges. Coming over to the center of the dashboard here, well, it's pretty simple and well laid out. Up top here you have this 7-inch touchscreen infotainment system that is optional. I think the standard one's like a 5 or 6 inch, and so this one is a little bit larger, but it's still not very impressive. This car doesn't have Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. The graphics for stuff like for the radio menus and stuff looks pretty outdated, to be perfectly honest. And the maps and stuff are fine, but it's just fairly underwhelming, quite honestly. And for a car that's marketed to young people, you would think that Apple CarPlay and Android Auto is a must, especially in this segment. Most of the cars in the segment have it, and this doesn't. And for those that don't want to use a phone mount and want to just have their phone and have the capability for that, CarPlay or Android Auto, it's really a sore exclusion. I'm really surprised they don't have it here, but it doesn't. Otherwise, though, it's okay. It's your standard sound system. It doesn't sound overly impressive, but it's about what you're getting on average for vehicles of this segment. And so overall, it's just average, I guess. Coming down, you have your climate controls here, which are, dual zone, digital here with a little screen, and overall, very simple and nicely laid out. As far as storage space in the Rogue Sport, it's pretty good. So anyway, in the doors, first thing, you have a pretty large map pocket here with a bottle holder, which is always nice to have. Coming over to the center here, you have a nice large center cubby, and that's also where you'll find your only USB jack in this car. Again, a car marketed to young people with only one USB jack. I mean, just about every car these days has at least 2, but you only have one here in the Rogue Sport. You have an auxiliary jack and a power outlet there as well. But anyway, good to have those right up front there. And then coming towards the back here, you have 2 cup holders, which are nice and deep and a good size. You have another little slot here. You could fit like a smartphone or the key or something like that in there, and good to have that. And then you have the center armrest, which is actually really nice. I like the detailing here with the stitching and whatnot. Pretty attractive looking, and it feels nice and soft too. Really great for resting your elbow on. Anyway, you open that up, and you'll find a very large cubby here, which has a little coin holder type thing here. And then you also have, very deep center console there. You can fit all kinds of stuff, but no additional power outlets, USB jacks, nothing in there. It's just a cubby and nothing more. But anyway, good to have all that storage too. Backseat space in the Rogue Sport is actually quite spacious. Again, because this is a little bit longer and it's not as scrunched in the back as a lot of these other subcompact crossovers, it's really quite spacious. So I'm 5'9", me sitting behind myself, I still have about 3 inches of legroom there to spare. Plenty of headroom, of course, with this being a crossover. And that's actually a really comfortable back seat back there. You know, nice soft seats again. They also have their own air vents here, which is great to have that. It's something you don't get in a lot of vehicles in this segment. So nice to have that as a fold down center armrest with 2 cup holders built into it. And so overall, actually a really nice back seat. Trunk space in the Rogue Sport is actually quite good. Again, one of the best, I think, in this compact segment. And so, you know, it's plenty of room there to fit, I'd say, you know, probably 2 or 3 suitcases with these. And you can stack them and remove that little privacy cover there if you'd like. Also, it may look a little bit shallow there, but the reason why they did that is so it's a flat load floor when you fold down those rear seats. But you can remove, they're almost like little drawers you can open up there. And so you can remove those little covers there. And then it goes down a little bit deeper. So you can either have that nice division there for a little extra storage, or just yank those things out all together and have a nice deep cargo space there, you know, if you need the maximum amount of space. And so overall, it's actually a really nicely sized cargo area. All right, so start up and go for a drive. The Rogue Sport here just has your basic Nissan key. Getting a little dated at this point, but still nice with the metal buttons. Anyway, it's keyless entry and push button start here in the SV trim. So anyway, you just leave the key in your pocket, hit the engine start button, and it starts right up. All right, so setting off in the 2017 Nissan Rogue Sport. Well, it's a very nice thing to just cruise around in, especially at low speeds here. It's very smooth and quiet and comfortable for the most part, and actually feels a little more refined than a lot of the other vehicles in this segment. And so overall, it feels pretty good. Just steering is fairly light here, especially at low speeds, and pretty numb, but I'll talk more about that as we get out onto the road here. Visibility, though, is excellent here in the Rogue Sport. You know, with a large windshield, it's very easy to see out. Of the hood drops down nicely, so you don't have to look out over it. View out of the sides is great. You know, large side windows once again. View out of the back is pretty good as well. The headrest get in the way a little bit there, but overall very easy, a nice large rear window to see out of. Another thing that really helps with visibility in the Rogue Sport is that you have this optional 360 surround view camera system. You also do have a backup camera standard, but nice to have you know, the 360 camera there to help you out whenever you're trying to park in tight spaces. Although this is a fairly small and easy to maneuver vehicle, so it shouldn't be too much of an issue, but nice to have nonetheless. But anyway, let's turn down onto this back road here and see how it does. Here we go. CVT, giving you a rubber band feeling. You can hear it, it's just strange. Anyway, so the Rogue Sport here has a 2-liter 4-cylinder direct injected engine that's still naturally aspirated, though. Does 141 horsepower, 147 pound-feet of torque. And so, you know, this vehicle weighs almost 3,400 pounds here in all-wheel drive trim. So as you can imagine, it's not very quick, and that CVT makes it feel even slower. There isn't even any like actual published 0 to 60 times, just estimates, but a safe estimate is around 9 seconds 0 to 60 for this. So not quick by any means. It's sufficient to get you around town. You know, whenever you're just buzzing around places, you're not having to go full throttle too often and stuff. It's only whenever you're on the highway, you know, trying to merge onto the highway, or when you need passing power, where you feel the lack of power, and you definitely feel a lack there in those circumstances. But you know, for most city driving and stuff, it's plenty of power to, you know, scoot around, you know, fairly quickly, and you know, so it's sufficient for its intended purpose of, you know, running to the grocery store, doing all your normal mundane daily driving tasks. This does them all just fine. And this engine, you know, will help conserve fuel a little bit, although I'll get to the fuel economy in a few minutes here, but that's not as great as you would expect either. All right, but we're coming up to some tighter corners here. Let's see how the Rogue Sport handles. So we're on 215 wide tires, and you can certainly feel the body roll in this vehicle. Although it has sport in its name, I would not consider this a sporty handling dynamic. I mean, it's not the worst. It doesn't feel sloppy, I will give it that. It doesn't feel sloppy necessarily. It just definitely has a good amount of give, and I think part of that is also these tires that aren't, you know, set up for, you know, any kind of sporty driving, so you even feel some sidewall flex there, I think, a little bit. I think that's part of what's making it feel so floaty. But of course, we've caught up to traffic here, so I can't push it too much more, but I think I got enough of a taste of it back there. And I've been driving this vehicle actually for over 100 miles already, and yeah, the handling is fine. Again, if you're not pushing it, it's perfectly adequate. It's fine, you know, going around corners at normal, you know, speed limits. It's fine, but if you're in a hurry, you're trying to rush, you start to feel the limits of this handling and this engine fairly early on. And so it's definitely a little underwhelming. Whenever you're caught behind people like this person doing 20 miles an hour around these corners, then, you know, it's obviously a walk in the park to, you know, take this thing around some corners. So, you know, other things to note about the Rogue Sport, though, the steering is pretty numb. Like, I'm basically not feeling anything through the wheel here. I mean, every once in a while I get a little bit of sensation of something, but it's pretty numb steering, so pretty hard to tell what the front wheels are doing, honestly. Yeah, so, I mean, the other good thing, though, is the brakes. You do have a very good amount of brake bite right at the top of the pedal, so there isn't too much travel. The brakes usually feel really good, and so overall, you know, that's well done. The throttle response is also pretty sharp. Again, you have the CVT, which kind of delays things because then it's always like, you know, trying to make up its mind of what the best rubber band ratio is in order to, you know, figure out what kind of power you want. But there's times where it's just like free revving almost, and it's like, I just want a little more power, and you could give me that power at 3,000 RPMs, but instead it's going all the way to 6 and getting all confused. And I really don't like CVTs, and I mean, some of them are tuned better than others, where that it's not the end of the world, whereas this one actually actively annoys me. And it's not only in the Rogue Sport, it's also in the Altima. I had an Altima as a rental car for a couple of days once, and that had the same rubber band feeling with the CVT. Nissan CVT, just not my favorite. And again, there's lots of really great automatics that get excellent fuel economy, or just go to a better CVT design and just revise it, because I think it definitely could use a revision. It's not the best out there. But yeah, whenever you are just cruising on a main road here, it is a very nice thing to cruise in. You know, the ride is very smooth, pretty refined, like I said. I think much more so than a lot of the other vehicles in this segment that are a little bit smaller. You know, this feels a little more stable, thanks to, I think, it's longer wheelbase and all that kind of stuff. And so overall, it does drive very nicely whenever you are just relaxing and driving in a non-sporty manner. And I think that's honestly why the Rogue and the Rogue Sport have been so popular. I think it's really good for the average Joe that just wants to go from point A to point B in reasonable comfort at a reasonable price, and they like the higher ride height. I think this does that very good. And, you know, the CVT, whenever you're just putting around town, you know, it doesn't have to go to those higher RPMs. It doesn't feel quite as rubber bandy. And overall, you know, if you were to test drive one of these things, you'd probably walk away feeling like it's a pretty nice vehicle. Again, if you had no sporting intentions and, you know, weren't really an enthusiast or were expecting anything sporty out of it. But, you know, there are a couple things here. Like I said, I've been driving it now for about 110 miles. And, two strange things. Every time that I come out in the morning to start it up, it always has a little bit of a rough idle for the first minute or so, and it sounds like it's like not doing so well. And I don't know if it's just like the gas, that it's just a bad tank of gas that's not quite up to par, or if it's, you know, just something with this engine or the tune in it or whatever it is. So it could just be this one that I am testing, or it could be, you know, a widespread issue. I don't know, but just something that I wanted to note. Another strange thing is, you know, a lot of fuel gauges in modern cars are a little deceptive. They like hanging out towards the full mark a little longer than is accurate. And this vehicle, I think, is the most dishonest fuel gauge out of all of them. Because in my time of driving here, this thing, you know, 110 miles I put on it, it's telling me I have 247 miles left of range in this tank, and it's still just barely under a full tank is what it's indicating. So I've gone through, you know, a third of the tank of gas, but it's still showing it as almost full, and it's like, that's not even remotely accurate. And then I'm sure once, you know, I drive another 50 miles, it's going to probably plummet with that fuel gauge and just drop off super fast. But it's like, why not just make it accurate? I guess it makes people feel better if they look down and see they have a full tank of gas, but if you don't actually have a full tank, then, you know, why make it be inaccurate like that? Unless it's, again, just a fluke with this car. Yeah, just something strange that, you know, still showing a full tank of gas basically after 100 miles of driving. But yeah, so I mean, speaking of fuel economy and all that kind of stuff, these are rated at 25 in the city and 32 on the highway. And so in my time of driving here, which was primarily city driving, a little bit of highway driving mixed in there, I averaged about 24 miles per gallon. So about 1 mile per gallon shy of the city mark, which is about the going rate as far as my test here in most cars. It's usually about 1 mpg lower than the city rating by the EPA. So not awful, but not great either. Now the thing is, though, this is actually rated 1 or 2 mpgs lower than the standard Rogue on the highway. So smaller, sportier, cars should, get better fuel economy than the larger, heavier Rogue, but it doesn't. And so, I mean, it's mostly just on the highway there. I'm guessing in real world fuel economy, you might actually see a little bit better here in the Rogue Sport. But I think on the highway, it just doesn't have as much passing power. So you gotta, use more gas in order to pass people and to accelerate and all that kind of stuff. And I think that might be part of the reason why it's a little bit lower here for the highway rating for the Rogue Sport. There goes that CVT again. I'm not even trying to accelerate fast, and it took it up to 4,500 RPMs. Maybe that's another reason why the MPG suffers a little bit. But again, 24 MPG, not bad, but again, nothing remarkable or impressive either. But the last thing I want to mention is the price. Now these, start I think in the low 20,000s. This one is the SV with the all-wheel drive, though as tested, this one is around $27,000. And at that price, I mean, it's still fairly competitive. There are some other options out there that are going to undercut it and still probably have some nicer features. Like I said, with having Apple CarPlay and Android Auto and some of the others. We might even get leather and some of the others for this price versus the cloth seats here. But overall, it's fairly competitive. I mean, you could get a comparable Ford Escape, though, which has more space, as an example of one competitor that's similarly priced. And, honestly, one of the other competitors to this vehicle is Nissan's own Rogue. I mean, the standard full-size Rogue is only about $2,500 more, trim versus trim. And you get extra power with the Rogue. According to the EPA, you get 1 mpg better on the highway in the standard Rogue. You get an optional third row, more space in the full-size Rogue. And so $2,500, most people are probably able to make a leap of $2,500. And at that, it's a tough, I mean, obviously everyone loves these smaller ones, and I think they're, obviously this will be easier to park and drive than a full-size Rogue, because those are a little bit on the larger side. And it is a little bit smaller, so it's a little lighter feeling in the corners and things like that. So maybe it's a little more sporty in that regard, although like I mentioned on the back road, still far from sporty as far as handling goes. But, so I think this will definitely sell to people that want something smaller, people that live in cities or areas where, you don't want the larger size, you don't need the third row or the larger cargo area, and you can save the extra $2,500, why not? But, I think that the Rogue is a better value proposition personally, but the numbers don't lie. Over in Europe, this is the best-selling vehicle for Nissan. So, if Europe is any indication, this thing should still sell very well, and I think a lot of people will see the value and the additional ease of use with the smaller Rogue Sport over the larger Rogue. But here in America, everyone doesn't mind a large car, so we'll have to see how the sales numbers play out here for the Rogue Sport. But overall, it's a nice thing to drive. Like I said, if you're not expecting anything sporty and you're just putting around town, it does a perfectly good job, and it does it with good amount of refinement. But like I said, I wish there was a little bit more tech. The safety tech is really great in this vehicle. That's one thing. It's got all the safety stuff with the Nissan Sensing, or whatever they call their autonomous systems, with the autonomous braking and blind spot monitoring and all that kind of stuff. And so it's good to have that extra safety net there. And it hasn't been obtrusive in my week of driving either. It hasn't cut in or done anything annoying. And so if you weren't told it had it, you would never know it's even working, which is very much appreciated, where a lot of the other systems are a little bit overreaching, and I appreciate that this one isn't. So overall, like I said, it's a pretty nice package. I don't think it's the greatest out there, but it's certainly worth considering if you're looking for something of this size and you don't mind the little bit of a dated tech with the infotainment and whatnot. Then overall, I think it's still worth considering. But anyway, huge thanks once again to Nissan for providing me with this Rogue Sport to review for you guys. Let me know your thoughts on the Rogue Sport in the comments below. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'll see you next time. Take care.